Wow, the Wadsworth Athenaeum looks like a castle.
It does, complete with turrets and everything. This Hartford, Connecticut landmark has been here since 1844, though it was founded 2 years earlier.
Yeah, I can see the year 1842 in stone above the main entrance.
Today it's a museum that holds countless and priceless paintings and other art pieces. But let's go inside.
This is a beautiful building, Jeff.
Yeah.
Check it out. They've got a Norman Rockwell painting over there.
Oh, yeah.
Tons of other paintings that look sort of familiar, though I'm no art connoisseur.
Right.
This place is really big.
This museum regularly makes top 10 must-see places in Connecticut, Ray.
All right, are we here to look at art?
No, we're actually here to look for a ghost, because they say the Wadsworth Athenaeum is haunted. Hello, I'm Jeff Belanger, and welcome to episode 264 of the New England Legends podcast.
And I'm Ray Auger. Thanks for joining us on our mission to chronicle every legend in New England, one story at a time. We can't do it without you, so thank you for being with us.
Please subscribe to our podcast if you don't already, and post a review for us on Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way in growing our audience. Or tell a friend or two about the show. So many story leads come from you, so please keep them coming. Reach out to us anytime through our website, through social media, or our super secret Facebook group.
Now, before we go exploring the haunted Wadsworth Athenaeum, we want to take just a minute to tell you about our Patreon patrons.
Our Patreon patrons are the backbone of everything that we do. We're not on some big fancy podcast network. We work directly for you. It's just us funding this enterprise, and our Patreon patrons help a ton with our hosting and production costs, our marketing and travel, and everything else that we do. It's appreciated more than we can express.
Plus, our patrons get early access to new episodes and bonus episodes and content that no one else gets to hear. It's a community of insiders, and we're thankful to each and every one of them.
It only costs $3 per month, Ray. It's like buying, Ray and I a cheap beer at a bar that we'll have to split, so we'll need 2 straws, I guess. But seriously, though, most people won't become patrons, so it matters quite a bit when you step up to the plate. Just head over to patreon.com/New England Legends to sign up.
Okay, Jeff, this Hartford Museum is big and beautiful.
Yeah, it sure is.
It's also pretty modern looking on the inside.
Yep.
Here's a little more information on the museum. Today, the Wadsworth Athenaeum is home to almost 50,000 works of art spanning 5,000 years of human history.
Wow.
This museum is the oldest continually operating public art museum in the United States.
Wow. I mean, this place is really historic.
It is. It was founded in 1842 by Daniel Wadsworth, who wanted to build a fine arts gallery, but he was pressured into making this an Athenaeum, which was a trendy term back in the 1800s for any kind of cultural building that also contained a library, a place of learning.
Got it.
Now, over time, it evolved into more of an art museum, which was always Wadsworth's vision.
The building dates back to 1844, as we said earlier, and obviously there's priceless works of art in here, so they have the latest security.
Now, you think it'd be tough for a ghost to hide with all these cameras, motion detectors, and guards keeping watch.
Yeah, you'd think. Yet, this haunting was so profound at one point, it made the newspapers. Way back on July 10th, 1911, the haunting of the Wadsworth Athenaeum got quite the write-up, quoting several current and former employees. Gathered for the 1911 interview was Miss Caroline Hewins, who was a librarian with the Hartford Library at the time, Frank Gay, who was the curator of the Wadsworth Athenaeum, Alfred Bates, he was a librarian with the Connecticut Historical Society, and finally there was Alfred Clifford, who was superintendent of the Wadsworth Athenaeum back then.
Now, collectively, this group of people spent many thousands of hours inside this building at all times of the day and night.
In the article, they claim most of the strange activity occurred in years prior, back when the Athenaeum looked quite different. So let's head back to 1891 and look for ghosts.
It's the winter of 1891, and something strange is happening here inside the Wadsworth Athenaeum.
What was that?
I don't know. You and I are standing still, and I don't see anybody else around here.
No.
But we both heard those footsteps.
Yeah, we did. Today, the building looks a lot different than where we came from, Ray. The most northern third of the Athenaeum is occupied by the Hartford Public Library. The picture galleries occupy the middle third of the building, and the final third is home to the Connecticut Historical Society. On the ground floor is the newspaper and reading rooms. The second floor is the library, and the entrance is on the north side of the building.
Library attendant Frank Gay was just telling us that sometimes when he's in the building, it's almost empty depending on the time of the day and the weather and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Frank said sometimes the stillness feels oppressive. He also said that sometimes men would be sitting in the reading room, quiet as can be, and complain they'd hear strange sounds. Rustling newspaper in the reading room isn't unusual. But when you're the only person sitting there in the reading room and you hear it right behind you, only to find no one's there, that gets unnerving. Frank explained there's no breeze or anything else that could have caused the sound. Patrons get on edge.
It's the little things, but it starts to add up. A patron complaint here and there, the odd footsteps with no source. Then there's the slamming doors. And hearing the distinct sound of someone walking down the stairs to the basement. Frank investigates to make sure it's not a patron wandering where they shouldn't be, but he finds no one there. Just the fading sound of footsteps.
Caroline Hewins told us how she was often nervous when she had to work late afternoon or closing time, especially in the winter months. She said that's when the strange activity is at its peak. She once witnessed a man and his son who were so startled by the rustling paper sounds in the reading room that the two sprinted out of the building and didn't stop until they reached the post office down the street. But it's Alfred Bates who believes he knows what, or rather who, is behind the disembodied footsteps and noises that echo throughout the Athenaeum.
Who?
Bates said it's believed the spirit is that of Reverend Thomas Robbins.
And Superintendent Clifford seems to agree. I can see him nodding.
Superintendent Clifford has slept alone in the building many nights when he had to work late and be in early the next morning. He's heard strange sounds and footsteps when he's alone in the building.
This group of past and present employees are level-headed folks. They don't believe in flights of fancy. They're scholarly and rational. But they can't deny what they've all experienced many times inside this building. But the identity of the spirit, Reverend Thomas Robbins, is as good a theory as any other.
Did Reverend Robbins work here too, or spend a lot of time here?
He did work here. Reverend Robbins was once a congressional minister and scholar who preached and taught all over Connecticut and parts of Massachusetts. From 1844 until 1854, he was appointed the first librarian of the Connecticut Historical Society, which, of course, is housed in this building. He never married and died in 1856, bequeathing his vast collection of over 4,000 books to the library. He was 79 years old when he died. Now, a painting of Reverend Robbins hangs in the Historical Society section of the building. Let's go see it.
Oh, look at that. The painting shows a white-haired old man sitting in a straight-back chair, looking sort of saintly.
Sure.
There's books on the writing desk next to him and what looks like a stack of paper that he's writing on.
This is who they believe is the ghost of Wadsworth Athenaeum. Why he chooses to haunt here and not some other place, we can only speculate. But those who work here have identified the footsteps as Reverend Thomas Robbins. And that brings us back to today. Okay, there's an amazing postscript to this story.
What's that?
Well, at the end of the newspaper article, it mentions how in 1892, the Wadsworth Athenaeum underwent some major renovations. As a worker was about to take down the painting of Reverend Robbins, he was warned to be careful because that's the building's ghost. The worker smiled. He'd heard the stories. He lifted the painting and dropped it by accident, sending the painting out of its frame and curling up on the floor. Now, the painting was saved and reframed, but they say that was the end of the ghost.
This 1911 newspaper article from the Bridgeport Times and Evening Farmer gathered a group of people who reflected on their memories from 20 years earlier. I love how the article addressed solid skeptical points. For example, one staff member pointed out that when a person is walking outside on Athenaeum Street, you can hear the footsteps inside the building too. Maybe that could explain it.
But then someone from the group points out that the phantom footsteps predate the existence of Athenaeum Street. Plus, in my experience, once you live or work in a building for even a short period of time, you get to know that building pretty well. I mean, you know which steps creak and groan, and you know which wall is home to the water pipes that tick, 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 tick when the warm water rushes through. You just sort of know these things.
Of course. You know the difference between someone walking outside and inside and someone walking down the basement stairs.
None of the people interviewed wanted to flat out say they believe in ghosts. They swore by their experiences and would relay that others claimed the ghost was that of Reverend Robbins, who spent the last part of his working life in the building. but they never wanted to make that leap on the record for themselves.
I just love how objective this article is.
Yeah.
This story is floated around the Wadsworth Athenaeum and region for decades. So the newspaper spoke to people who were there, people who shrugged their shoulders and said, I heard what I heard.
And that gets to the heart of it, Ray. Most of us are rational people who approach the world in a similar way. But once in a while, an experience shakes us up because it doesn't fall neatly into a predefined box. You may call that experience paranormal or a ghost or a spirit, but we don't know for sure. And that gets us talking about it.
And that brings us to After the Legend, where we take a deeper dive into this week's story, sometimes veer off course into stranger waters.
We do. Hey, if you'd like to see that painting of Reverend Thomas Robbins, you can see it on our website. Just click on episode 264. So, haunted paintings, I love that.
I love haunted paintings. I love haunted houses,
Yeah.
libraries, whatever the case may be, public buildings, that kind of thing, where there's no solid evidence. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's just stories.
I'm sure, I know, neither of us are like art critic connoisseurs, right? I mean, whatever, paintings are nice.
Yeah.
But you've seen a painting once in a while. It sort of stops you in your tracks, right?
Yeah.
The
And
eyes
follows you
The
sometimes,
eyes
yeah.
follow you, right? Like you're like, ooh, you know?
Right.
And you go, oh, you just shudder a little bit because they're just...
There's something haunting about the paintings alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you realize like, oh, that's a portrait of so-and-so who sat there for this artist and is long dead. The artist is long dead. You know, there's some sort of connection there, and you wonder. Now, there are famed haunted paintings all over the world. People that say, and often it's of a person, and you wonder, like, did you capture some essence of that person? Sometimes it's not of a person. It's just like, you know, a wagon sitting in a field. But bad luck or bad things seem to happen around that painting. I just want to say a little more about Reverend Robbins. He was born in Norfolk, Connecticut, and he died in Colebrook, Connecticut. So, and he even attended Yale, by the way. So he's a nutmegger through and through. And he's buried in Old North Cemetery in Hartford, Connecticut. And so one thing that we sort of breezed by, he had this vast collection of books, 4,000. I mean, that's significant. That would have been expensive. I mean, not a lot of people had that many books. And he bequeathed them all to the library when he died. Was he attached to the building?
Was his essence attached to the books?
To the books, which was, I mean, he'd been collecting since he was, you know, a teenager.
So a little bit of his spirit seeped into those books over time.
Right. So
Each
I
and
don't
every
know.
one of them.
And so the Athenaeum underwent a lot of renovations over its lifespan. When you look at it today, I mean, it's an incredible building. It looks like a giant castle, and it's got these additions. J.P. Morgan, like that J.P. Morgan, right? He funded the Renaissance Revival Memorial around 1910. There was the Tudor Revival Cult Memorial that was also in 1910. So the building expanded and expanded. And by 1964, all those organizations that were part of the library, the Historical Society, or the Athenaeum rather, the Historical Society and everything else, they moved out into their own buildings, and it was just an art gallery. I think since 1969, it's been nothing but a giant art gallery, the most prominent in Connecticut, for sure, and one of the biggest in New England. And I love that it was always intended for that, and it has been that since 1842. Longest continually operating. How cool is that?
Most haunted too, perhaps.
Most haunted too. I feel like every great old museum has some sort of ghostly, you know.
Well, think of the artifacts that are in there,
Right.
and who was attached to those artifacts, and maybe who died on the property.
5,000 years of human experience. And then, you know, of course, some people have heart attacks in there or whatever.
Yeah.
And some people, you know, that's their happiest place. They don't like being at home.
That's a good question. When you die, do you go to your happy place, or do you end up where you died?
I've given talks at a lot of libraries.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of them are great old historic buildings. And hey, is the place haunted? And the library, sometimes they're like, you know what? You know, there's a few things. And then we get to talking about the nature of libraries. And I said, you know, you have patrons that are more comfortable here than in their homes, right? Their home is not a safe place for whatever reason.
Right.
But here they curl up with a book. They sit in the corner. You're nice to them. Like this is their happiest place, you know, or librarians that just love being around books and people. And so why wouldn't that make sense that this is where they would want to stay?
Right.
You know, we're connected to how many ghosts are in those books?
Sure.
You know what I mean? I don't just mean like works of fiction. I mean like those authors are dead.
Yeah.
This is their words coming.
Maybe that was their happy place.
Right.
They ended up in their books.
In their books, right? I mean, as a guy who's written a few books, one can hope they survive me.
Yeah.
You know, that one day I'll be long dead and someone will be like, oh, you know, the Call of Kilimanjaro, or like, you know, the world's most haunted places, weird Massachusetts. Let me dust this one off. And sit down and curl up with one of my books. And there's my voice coming from the distant past, from beyond the grave, and connecting with them. And I always sort of love that immortality of books. Yet I'm realistic enough to know that most authors don't survive. You know, you don't make it centuries. You know, only the really greats. I think working on it.
You have to define haunting or haunt to when you're dealing with a museum or a library like this. What is haunting? What sometimes just being around those old artifacts feel haunted.
Yeah,
they just feel it. It's not. But there's just you get this deep sensation of history, and sometimes that can come off as haunted.
You've heard of psychometry? You have. It's when, like, you know, like the old fortune teller says, give me the item, and you put a ring in her hand and she goes, I see a man with like dark hair and blue eyes. Right. Like that's psychometry. The idea that you can touch an old object and pick up where it's been or who's held it or whatever. Or
Not too far-fetched, I don't think.
I really don't. No, I mean, you know, you bring in, like, you go to some salvage yard and you pick up a piece of furniture and you bring it into your house and you suddenly feel uneasy.
Or how about looking at the original Declaration of Independence, or when you're in D.C., there's a weight that comes over you.
Right.
Like, this is so old. There is so much history here. So many hands touch this that are predominant in U.S. history, where you feel something on you.
Yeah. Like those guys are on our money.
Yeah.
right. Like that one and that one and that one.
Sure.
You know, yeah. And so, no, I understand. There's gravity to it.
Yeah.
And you feel that, and you feel everything that went into that. And so museums have that. 5,000 years of human history.
Right.
I mean, come on. Of course you're going to pick up on different things. But I love that there's always an attempt to identify the spirit, even if you're 100% wrong.
Right.
Oh, the Reverend Robbins. I mean, he was here for years, and a sweet old guy. He would never hurt us.
They just happen to have a painting of him that kind of looks haunted. Like, well, that's very, So they just chose that as the ghost.
Right. So this is our ghost.
Makes a better story.
You feel better. It gives you a sense of control where you really don't have any. I mean, if you're alone in the building closing up and everybody's gone for the day and you're just finishing up and you hear like footsteps going down into the basement and you open the door because you should, you know, you do your job. Hello.
No one
tick,
there.
Tick, tick, and then gone. And you're like, good night, Reverend Robbins. I'm going home now. I'll see you tomorrow. Right?
You may know that he was a good guy, so you're not too worried about him being a little too aggressive as in his afterlife.
No need for me to come down there. Make sure
I'm good.
Just gonna lock up and go home now. And you feel better, even though that who knows?
Yeah.
But that's the story that stuck. And I like so circa 1910 when the article was written, they sort of put an end on it. Well, the renovations of 1892 seemed to put an end to it. And but something else that happened, you know, not too long after is that all of those books and those paintings and his painting, right, would have gone with the Connecticut Historical Society, to the new place. Is that haunted?
Haunted?
We should follow up. Oh, we need to do a follow up now.
Well, there is something better about a haunted museum than like a murder house. So I think you're more comfortable in a haunted museum, a haunted library, than a haunted murder house.
Yeah.
So
I love how they said patrons would run out of there. I don't know.
I'd feel comfortable. I think I'd feel comfortable with that kind of haunt.
Totally understand for sure.
Yeah. Please be sure to share your favorite episodes on social media. Like and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, because we don't want you to miss a thing. And contact us with the odd legends in your own town. Most of our story leads come from you.
We'd like to thank our Patreon patrons, and our theme music is by John Judd.
Until next time, remember,
the bizarre is closer than you think.